So today we're flipping the script. Normally, on Between Two Quarters, we talk to people who buy enterprise software, trying to sort of get behind the covers of like what it means to buy software, what the buying process looks like, what they really think of startups. But today we're talking to Roshan Patel, who's the CEO of Arrow, which is a startup, and you spend a lot of your time thinking about how to sell to enterprise customers. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Also, you are a portfolio company of ours at MVP Capital, so we've known each other for a few years now. So I don't know if we've ever interviewed each other. This will be the first
No,
time.
yeah, first time.
uh, there's a lot that I know about you that I want everyone to hear. But can we start with your background before starting Arrow? Coming out of school, you have your master's in finance. You start out as first a trader and then a venture investor. Can you talk a little bit about that background and like maybe how that informed your thinking about startups?
Yeah, totally. So I was, like you said, in finance early in my career. I worked in VC, so on the investor side of the table, and got to work with dozens of startups, mostly pre-seed through Series A. So I got to see what it's like being on the investor side of the table, and
Hmm.
it gave me the itch to be a founder because I was seeing so many talented founders. It looked like a lot of fun. I was always working with them at arm's length,
Yeah.
but I really wanted to go deep into something. And my entire family comes from healthcare. So my parents had a practice, my uncle's a surgeon, grandfather's a doctor. So everyone went to med school except me. So I'm like the one failure in the family. But I knew that uh, if I was going to start a startup, it would involve the business side of healthcare because those were the two things that I knew best. So my parents had a practice growing up in like high school and in college. I was helping them like run the business side,
Yeah.
especially handling like revenue cycle and billing and a lot of, administrative work. So I got to just see how challenging it was for my parents to collect money from insurance.
Yeah.
And then I knew that that was a massive problem that needed to be solved. So that's what's led me here.
Very cool. So you had a little bit of like the reps of seeing a bunch of people start businesses. Some probably did really well, some probably not so well. What were some like any like takeaways that you're like, when I start Arrow, I am not going to do this, or I will do this? Like anything that like you stuck with you?
It's tough to say because I think, um, I mean, I did see maybe like 20 or so successful funding rounds that I was involved in. So I got to see a lot from like what makes a pitch deck successful or financial model or how founders message or position themselves in the market. So when I was going out to raise, I already sort of knew how investors get excited or what they like to see. So that definitely helped
Yeah.
as I was navigating fundraising for like the 21st time, not the first time.
Right. Right. No, that goes a long way because I do think that some founders who've never seen a fundraise process before, a lot of it's like there's like nuance and it's not all, some of it's like practical advice, but some of it's like you kind of wanted to have seen it before to get a vibe of
Exactly.
how it
Yeah.
works.
And I mean, part of my job as a VC was looking at incoming pitch decks
Yeah.
and deciding what to invest in. And so I knew whatever would get me excited would likely get other VCs and investors
Hmm.
excited. So it was helpful just build a pitch deck that makes me excited.
Yeah.
And that seemed to work.
Very cool. What does Arrow do
Yeah.
today?
Yeah. So Arrow helps healthcare providers collect more revenue and collect that cash faster. And the way we do that is we give their back office revenue cycle teams AI tools so that they can work on insurance claims. So almost like an AI co-pilot in a sense, just like engineers have Claude Code, healthcare back office teams have Arrow.
That makes a lot of sense and super relevant in your background with your family is like incredibly applicable, which is very cool. Who's your customer at Arrow?
Yeah, so we typically, our customers, I mean, healthcare is so broad. There's so many different types of healthcare
Yeah.
providers. Our sweet spot is sort of what we call like mid-market SMB healthcare practices or physician groups. So anywhere from, a handful of like 3 to 5 locations to 50 plus location specialty practices. So these can be things like your dermatology
Hmm.
group or cardiology, primary care, urgent care. We don't really work with large health systems, and we also don't really work with really small, like solo therapists, for example.
And what have you kind of learned about your your customer base as you started to sell into them? What sort of defines that customer base?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, they are like a small business in a sense, and just like any business, it's all about money. Like in healthcare, it's sort of a unique industry where the healthcare provider, they'll render a service on day one, but they may not get paid until 60, 90 days out.
Yeah.
So that lag in cash flow makes it really tough to run a business versus most businesses, you get paid a lot quicker. So what we found is that these businesses really care about collecting money and collecting that money as fast as possible. Unlike something like a large health system, they obviously care about money, but they have other funding sources and things like that.
It is pretty crazy when you think about that. The whole industry does run on like a much bigger lag than other industries, and healthcare's like exists to help people. So it's like in some ways, like doctors don't think like business people in many cases, and they're like in an industry that's harder to run than most businesses. So it does create like a weird dynamic, a challenging dynamic, really.
Absolutely. Yeah. Most of the practice owners are physicians
Yeah.
and they didn't go to business school. They went to med school. And I think they find it really challenging to be a healthcare practice because they're learning, what is a income statement and, how do I get a line of credit, things like that. They're doing for the first time.
Right.
And their full day is providing healthcare. And then they have to go home at night and think about the business side.
Yeah. And then there's some models where like there's private equity backed roll ups and there's some venture backed like healthcare models where they've thought more about the business. So they build they build upsell into their business. But by definition, it's almost like there's less trust there. So like delivering really good care sometimes means like not doing the extra thing. Right. And so doctors are, yeah, it's a great dynamic, but it's also important for them to have like an arrow to sort of help them, increase like revenue collections and reduce time to cash.
Yeah, a lot of reasons that physicians start their own practice is to have flexibility and sort of be their own boss.
Yeah.
And we're seeing more and more practices struggle to survive and ultimately, get bought by PE or get acquired by a health system. But with that comes less flexibility, although it does provide more stability in the business.
Yeah. I have two kids, and their pediatrician closed up her shop and joined like a large hospital system like last year because it was really difficult to run the business. Everything from rent to cash collections, and it was a shame, right? Because it was sort of like an independent pediatrician that existed for 30 years, and now she's in office and it's in like part of a larger hospital system. It's still her, but it's like a different vibe, and I don't know if it's more rewarding or less rewarding, but it's not a small business anymore.
Right. And I think a lot of patients really value being able to go to their local business, whether that be their restaurant or their healthcare provider, and have that relationship.
So selling into this customer profile, which you sort of said is like a small business where they're trying to run the business, and this might not be the top thing they're thinking about every day, but it's really important. How did you incorporate that into your messaging and to your sales process?
Yeah, I think selling into healthcare I found is very challenging. Think about how hard it is to get your doctor on the phone, but then think about how hard it would be to do that and try and sell them something. So we really had to nail our messaging such that when they see a communication from us, it makes them like stop what they're doing and be like, yeah, I should chat with these guys. And that's hard to do because like you're saying, they're thinking about, the surgery they have scheduled that afternoon.
Yeah.
They're not thinking about, how am I going to collect cash 2x faster?
Right.
So we really spent a lot of time iterating on messaging, positioning. It's something we treat as like an ongoing experiment. So we're always adjusting. We have multiple outbound campaigns going with different messaging and sequencing, and we're always trying to optimize what's resonating well with our customers.
What's the best way to find your customer profile? These sort of 3 to 100 clinic companies.
It's tough. They're not easily on a lot of databases,
Yeah.
and their contact information is not very easy to find. Doctors don't really list their personal cells, and often
Are they not on LinkedIn?
Oftentimes not.
Okay,
to be
interesting.
honest. Yeah,
Interesting.
and oftentimes, what happens is the practice will hire some sort of like business manager or practice manager to run the business side and like day-to-day operations. And that person is also typically not on LinkedIn either. That tends to be more of like, 40 to 50-year-old, their careers sort of span many different industries and they just sort of like ended up in this role.
Yeah.
It's not like something you go to school for and things like that. But so we found LinkedIn is not very helpful. Neither is email. Like when, cold email has obviously been a channel for a long time, but with AI, it's made it a lot easier for everyone to use this channel and personalize messages at scale. And so it's really hard to cut through the noise. And so I think what we're finding best is more old school approaches. So we've done direct mail to get some of our early customers. I went door to door in New York City.
No way.
And then more recently, we found like conferences and hosting events to be one of the most successful channels of getting in front of customers.
So door to door is like how I think pharma reps and like medical device reps have, I don't know if they're selling technically, but like they're informing doctors. And so I've been in doctors' offices when like somebody comes in with like maybe donuts and they're like just stopping by to say hello. Is that what that was like? What was going door to door like in doctors' offices?
Yeah, I mean, it was like a very unique experience where for maybe a period of like 2-3 months, all me and my co-founder did was just go together and go door to door. And we decided to do that because that's what ZocDoc did in their early days.
Really?
So I was listening to their interviews that they gave, and they would go around New York knocking on doors.
Yeah.
So we did the same thing and basically people told us, please get out. What are you doing here? Like, you don't have an appointment. And so very quickly we learned about this pharma rep strategy of they'll buy coffee, donuts, lunch for the practice and schedule a time to chat.
Yeah.
So that's what we ended up learning and finding success with was as long as you bring something for the front desk, they're going to be more willing to talk to you. So we would basically find a Dunkin' Donuts and then every 10 minutes buy a dozen donuts, go to another healthcare provider and just keep doing that.
And did it work?
Yeah, out of that, we actually got a few early customers in New York, which was great. And what's great about New York is it's so dense that oftentimes the healthcare practices know each other, especially if they're in the same specialty.
Yeah.
And then very often we would find this gold mine of like an office building where every floor is just healthcare providers. So we would go in and just go around the whole building and eventually get chased by security.
That's really funny. You're right. There are those like parts of the city, like I would say lower Fifth Avenue below 14th Street, like almost every building has like a doctor's office on the first floor.
Exactly. Yeah.
What other strategies have worked for you, like in real life, like conferences, trade groups? Are there other things that like aren't or outside that normal, like digital messaging that's worked really well?
Yeah. So originally we tried conferences, and we got a booth, and we were like, we're gonna get so many customers, and what we found is like no one cares about your booth. You're just in a sea of booths, and so it's very hard to stand out, especially at conferences where if you're going, especially for a business or financial focused healthcare conference, everyone's booth looks the same. So what we found success with was hosting our own event during the conference. So we would set up a dinner basically and invite our prospects to come to that dinner because they're always looking for something to do after the conference ends.
Yeah.
And so we would host our own private dinner, go to a nice steakhouse, rent out a private room, and just have like a curated dinner and topics for conversation where we can get our customers sort of talking about the problems they face. And then they appreciate a nice steak dinner. And usually after that, they're willing to chat with us to learn more.
Got it. So a steak dinner and like a good conversation is enough to like create a private event. You don't have to have a magician or something.
Exactly.
Something off the top.
And so very often what we started doing is not even going to the conference. We'll just go to the city the conference is in on the same dates and just host a dinner.
Yeah. It's funny. I hear that quite a lot because conferences are pretty expensive. And if everyone's there for the conference and you don't need the content, then great. How often do you do that? Is that like a monthly thing, or are there enough conferences to do that on a regular basis?
Yeah, especially in healthcare, there's multiple conferences every day in healthcare because it's such a large industry. So the challenge becomes which conferences are actually valuable and like which ones are our customers going to. So for those, there's probably one a month. So that's what we do every month. We host a dinner in a new city. So it's fun for me. I get to travel around and visit parts of the US I usually don't go to, but that's been like our most successful channel so far.
Very cool. Yeah, that's like a very optimistic spin on the travel. Everyone loves to go to Orlando in the summer for conferences.
Yeah. We were just there.
um, you've scaled up, and so now you have other people selling. In addition, when you started, it was just you. How did you think about adding your first salesperson? What was that like decision process like for you? How did you know it was time to do that?
Yeah, I think so the way me and my co-founder work is he's our CTO, he works on the engineering side. So my responsibility was sales, like get customers. And once I had found a strategy, back then I was doing emails, cold calls, things like that. Once I had found a strategy that seemed to produce a handful of meetings per week that I could write how to do this in a Google Doc,
Hmm.
that's when I knew, okay, I can now double myself by hiring someone else.
Got it.
And so we brought in our first sales rep, and all they did was cold outbound, the same as me.
Got it. So you kind of found a strategy that worked, and you're like, now it's time to replicate me. What did you look for in that first sales hire?
Yeah, I think similar to probably what most people look for in a salesperson is just extreme hunger, ambition, grit, um, willingness to deal with rejection and not get discouraged. And I was also looking for people that could experiment. So not just take the Google Doc I gave them,
Hmm.
but try new things and iterate off of it to find better strategies or things that maybe I hadn't thought of.
Was industry experience important for you or not important?
It was something I was hopeful to find, but ultimately I didn't find it very important. So we ended up hiring 3 sales reps, and I don't think any of them came from healthcare. And I think as long as they have a strong ability to learn the
Hmm.
language um, and just have that mindset of like I always need to be improving, that's what I cared about most. Especially if they had sold in multiple industries before, I think that may have been better because they're willing to adapt and learn faster.
Interesting, because that is like a question that comes up often for people's first hire, which is like, do you have to have industry experience or do you have to have experience selling a product that looks very much like your product? So you're like not industry experience, but what about like selling? Did they have to sell software before, or did that like
Yeah, I think
also
what
not
was
matter?
most important was software, ideally to the same customer size.
Yeah.
So it's
Okay.
helpful because our universe of customers is quite large versus I didn't find it helpful if someone was only prospecting into like 10 massive enterprise accounts.
Right.
That outreach strategy is a lot different than ours.
Okay. Interesting. So customer size, customer profile mattered more than like industry.
Exactly.
Um, First step is hiring an AE, and then as you scale up, you have to start thinking about sales leadership. Talk to me about that journey from an AE to to finding somebody to lead sales.
Yeah, once I found that a lot of my time was getting sucked up by trying to manage 3 sales reps
Yeah.
and like give them scripts and give them territories and build commission plans, I was like, my time could be better spent. So we brought in our first head of sales this year, actually, so a few months ago. And he partly does management, but also partially does sales himself.
Hmm.
And that was really important to me to find someone that sort of does 50-50. So he also acts as an AE and does demos and does discovery calls alongside me. I still do those as well.
Yeah. What and talk about sales leadership background. What were the things that you were looking for when you started your process?
Yeah, for me, I think having healthcare experience was much more important.
Okay.
Ideally, selling to the same exact customers because I wanted to find someone who knows what works, who's done it before,
Yep.
and can just replicate it here. I didn't want to take a bet on someone who didn't have experience in healthcare and like they'll figure it out because we have something that's working.
Yep.
We know how the demo runs. We know we can get the customer live and make them happy. So I want someone just come in and pour fuel on the fire, not someone who's going to take like 6 months to figure it out.
That makes a lot of sense. What was your process like for finding your head of sales?
Yeah, first it was finding people on LinkedIn, trying to reach out, set up you know coffee chats, things like that. So we had some moderate success there, but ultimately the people I wanted to chat with, they're not going to respond to a LinkedIn message. You
Mhm.
have to like actively pry them away from their current role
Yeah.
and convince them to join you. And I found that very challenging. So we ended up working with a recruiting firm to help us do that. And the quality of talent we got was incredible, and we were able to, find a great candidate from them.
I think that's a good point because, you can take like a passive or an active approach to recruiting in any industry, but more importantly for senior roles. And if you're passive, it's sort of like you put up a job spec and you're just going to get whoever applies. And most people like are looking for a job. And the people that you probably really want to talk to aren't looking for a job, but that's a harder sell. And it's also like not a sell that necessarily needs to happen at like a point in time. It's almost like you always kind of have to be thinking about who your next hire is so you can meet with them.
Exactly. Yeah. And especially for who we were looking for, there's probably only like a dozen people in our exact, ICP, same specialty,
Yeah.
selling the same sort of back office software in New York City area that have done it at like Series A and B companies before. So there's only a very small number of people.
Yeah.
So I obviously had already reached out to them, but they respond much better coming from a recruiter.
That makes sense. So today you have a bunch of customers, but at one point you didn't have any customers. Tell me about your first customer, how you found them. What was that process like?
Yeah, our first customer actually was another startup, and
Okay.
they were providing healthcare. They were a therapy company, and we actually just were in the same sort of Slack group for healthcare founders.
Nice.
And we sent her a cold DM, and she responded saying, "Yeah, sure, I'll give it a shot." And so it's just by chance. It
Yeah.
could have been from going door to door. It could have been from cold calls, but it was just by chance. This was our first one.
Yeah.
And what was great is that she was in therapy, behavioral health, and she really opened a door to give us more customers in behavioral health because there are so many therapists and therapy practices in this country, and it's been exploding since COVID. So that really helped us get our foot off the ground and scale from there.
So now that, in that time from your first customer to where you are today, what are like 2 selling lessons that you've learned that you kind of wish you knew back then?
Yeah, well, I don't have any background in sales,
Yeah.
so my first sales calls were very embarrassing. It was like, oh, I'll give them my pitch and then ask them if they want to sign up, and quickly learn that that's not how sales is done. And I had to learn sales myself, and I was consuming so many sales resources, methodologies,
Yeah.
and textbooks, and I found that like
Are there any things that you would recommend that like people, anything that was particularly helpful as you were sort of like building that craft?
there's a ton of podcasts I was listening
Yeah.
to. The one that I still listen to almost every day is 30 Minutes to President's Club. It's a very popular like SaaS.
30 Minutes to President's Club.
Yeah,
Okay,
very
cool.
popular like SaaS selling podcast.
Yeah.
And they cover almost every aspect of sales, but you always learn something new on every episode. But a huge change I made was running a real discovery process, and really not skimping on understanding their pain points, how big of a priority it is, how much it's costing them.
Yeah.
And once you really cover that, like the sale almost does itself because they've just told you everything that's wrong.
Yeah.
And then you just have to come in and show them how your product solves their problem.
How do you get people to do discovery, right? Because you're right. Like if you're willing to sit here and have a conversation with you, that's great. But like a lot of people, that you're selling to maybe aren't. So what's the magic in getting someone into that position to have the discovery conversation?
Yeah, that was tough for me because I always thought like, they just want to see the product. They want to see
Yeah.
the demo. I would get into these calls, and the doctor usually would just be like, I have 10 minutes before my next meeting. What do you have for me?
Yeah.
And you can't really run a discovery process like that.
Right.
So I got more and more comfortable being like, hey, I'd love to just ask you a couple questions to learn about the business and what's going on for you. Then we can jump into a demo. So like really setting an agenda up front, letting them know you're going to see a demo. Don't worry, but I just have a couple questions.
Yeah. And I guess in that case, like then they kind of open up a little bit.
Exactly. Yeah. It takes a little bit of time for them, but the more open-ended you can make your questions, the better. And also like establishing some, small talk before rather than just jumping into like, what's your revenue? Like things like that.
As you build up your sales force, do you think you'll ever go back to like the in-person bringing donuts to like, would you ever tell like a group of young AEs to like go do that? Like,
Well, actually, when I first hired my
Yeah.
first BDR,
Yeah.
we did that. We
Yeah.
would go together
Good,
and
yeah.
divide up New York. And we've been thinking like as we're scaling, like our sales reps are now there's two in New York, and we just hired our first one on the West Coast. So we can replicate that in-person strategy in different cities now
Yeah.
because we've already saturated New York. They're tired of seeing us, but not in San Diego.
I think the geography of like customers relative to like how they engage in decision making, I'm not sure that people talk about that like a lot. Like people talk about like geography from a like, hey, there's more of my customers somewhere else in the country. Like for tech, it might be West Coast. For finance, it could be like New York. Maybe it's Midwest is like manufacturing. Have you noticed like a different vibe from customers like who are in different parts of the country? Like, or is there an easier, doctor conversation if somebody's like in Florida versus New York versus California?
Maybe anecdotally, but yeah, there's always Southern charm or Midwest charm that people are more receptive versus I think New York, we tend to be very like just get to the point. And but I think you'll find like as long as they've agreed to a meeting, they're willing to talk to you. And it's just the hard part is just getting that meeting, because once we have that meeting, it's almost 99% that they have some pain point related to getting paid or getting paid faster.
Yeah. Have you used or are using any like AI driven marketing, sales, voice tools? Like, is there anything that's sort of been a technology unlock for you?
A huge one has been content creation.
Okay.
I'm sure a lot of people have probably done this already, but we've started making like very customized decks down to the customer level, and sharing that with them in our outreach to try and get a meeting, to show them that we've done our research and we know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Versus before, the personalization was pretty surface level, but now we can send them like, here's a 12-page deck on the numbers that we've gathered, online from public
About
sources.
your specific practice.
Yes, and then the title page is like their practice name and who we're addressing it to. So we found that really helps as well.
That's actually really interesting. So that's been like an unlock, and you think that like just opens up the conversation because like it just proves you've thought about their business ahead of time.
Yeah, exactly. Once they see that, they're like, oh, this is not a spam message. They're actually reaching out to me individually.
Yeah, that's very cool. Well, Roshan, this is amazing. I really appreciate you taking some time to chat. Obviously, we see each other quite a lot, but not with microphones. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.